our team for since 2007, probably my 15th season in first, 14th season first, coming up. This really just means I have a lot of experience trying to figure out what our team is going to do on the field, and then also making sure our robot works before we get to the field. So kind of the discipline that it takes to once we're at competition. And the whole point of this presentation is to kind of help guide us through what we're going to do in this upcoming season to break down a game and figure out what works for us on the field. In the past, this is kind of our approach to how we've taken, how we've strategized for our team as a whole. It's just that on the robot side, things have been a little bit vaguer. We knew we wanted to make it to Worlds, but kind of how we did that was a little bit more abstract than, say, making it into eliminations. We knew what it took to make it into eliminations at the local level, but not necessarily what it took to make it to Einstein. And it's kind of the same thing on the business side, where we kind of know what it takes to inspire kids to join our team. We seem to have way more kids than we know what to do with some years. But winning the highest awards on the business side or getting support from government is a little bit more abstract. It takes a lot more work just figuring out what to do in order to make that happen. And a lot of these goals are kind of the same, are kind of intertwined, I would say, from the business side and from the technical side. It's very difficult to inspire kids to join your team if you don't ever hit the field with a working robot. So we go to the next slide. We know that every year our goal is to make it to World Championships and do well at World Championships. And so with the district system, we can start with district points at the top. The district system makes it very easy and clear how to get district points by being Alliance captain. By doing well in eliminations, you get points for every level of eliminations you make it through, or by awards. There are only 2 awards that get you to World Championships by default, but all of the rest of the awards give you points. And as you can see, if you want to be an Alliance captain, you need rank points in recent years. In 2008, that wasn't really a thing. You needed to win matches. To win awards, at least for the technical awards, you definitely need a well-built robot, and you need to be able to describe it and communicate it. And kind of the winning strategy for awards is you need an approach to how you're going to demonstrate your robot to the judges. And so on kickoff day, which I call day 0, we figure out what we're going to do for a specific game, but in the preseason, we figure out what, in the preseason work, we figure out how we're going to spend our time getting there.
So one thing we look for on day 0, like Jesse said, is point powers. Essentially, point powers are a function in the game that scores points that we spend the least time on, or a point power, or points per time spent. For example, in the 2015 game, one of the point powers was to put a can on top of a stack of totes. ILITE's initial strategy, however, was to stack totes by themselves, and only until week 6 did we realize that we should adapt our strategy to conform more towards the game. So starting at week 6, we started to create a strategy on our robot in order to put the cans on top of these stacked totes. And it only took until the world stage where we perfected and fine-tuned this strategy.
All right, so this is the 2017 field game layout, and the most obvious thing right here is the huge structures of the airships. This made it fairly impossible in order to see across the field. And also, you can see there's a lot of wide open space besides the airships. So this meant that the game was probably going to be very fast-paced. Robots would be flying across the field. Now, a lot of factors that you have to take into consideration of this is also with, during eliminations, you're allowed to choose what driver station you're at. During eliminations, as a strategy, we would purposely try and position different teams at a specific station depending on what their strengths and what they would be doing within the match was. So if they were a highly competitive gear robot, we were not going to put them in the middle driver station because then they would not be able to see across the field in order to drive. Next slide.
What we're going to do is we're going to play the animation.
Yeah.
for 2017, and then we're going to figure out kind of what some of the point powers were. So basically, the most amount of points you could get for the time spent both in the build season and in the competition season.
Alliances of 3 teams each prepare for a long-distance airship race by collecting fuel to build steam pressure, installing gears to engage rotors, and climbing aboard for liftoff. The airship best prepared for flight when the launch timer reaches 0 wins. Matches begin with robots touching their Alliance station wall. Teams may preload up to 10 fuel elements and 1 gear on each robot. Fuel is available in hoppers placed around the perimeter of the field. Additional fuel and gears are available at the Alliance loading station. During the first 15 seconds of the match, the robots are autonomous. They work to reach their baseline, score fuel in the boiler, or deliver gears to the airship. During the following 2-minute and 15-second teleoperated period, human drivers remotely control their robots. They continue to gather fuel from the field and the hoppers to score in the boilers. They also collect and deliver more gears. Human players located behind the Alliance station wall deliver gears and recycle
Katie ML, come to the front office for your shoes.
Steam pressure builds as fuel is added to the boilers. The high boiler produces more steam per unit of fuel than the low boiler. The more fuel scored in the boiler, the higher the steam pressure climbs. Alliances earn points for the amount of steam pressure built, and pressure over a certain level earns an additional bonus. Each airship has 4 rotors with some gears missing. Oh dear. Gears delivered to the airship lifts are retrieved by the airship pilots, who then place them in the gear train to engage and spin up the rotors. Each rotor requires an increasing number of gears to become engaged. Points are awarded for each airship rotor turning by the end of the match. Airships spinning all 4 rotors also earn an additional bonus. Towards the end of each match, pilots deploy ropes for their robots to climb aboard. Alliances earn points for each robot secured aboard the airship by the end of the match. Be prepared. It takes time for the boilers to process fuel for the airships. Fuel put in the boiler near the very end of the match may not get processed before the airship takes off. The Alliance with the highest score at the end of the match earns the win. Ready your robot. Fly your banner and prepare to take flight.
Alright, so from there, what do you guys think a point power was?
Climbing the ladder.
Okay. Anyone else have any ideas?
The rotors.
The rotors, okay.
Gears.
Okay.
Anything else? So we saw that there was fuel to do in the game. They're worth points. How many points though?
So, yeah, so go ahead, inside. Alright, so with us, we were determining, okay, with point powers, something that Harrison was talking about with time, the thing that's crucial to talk about is not only the amount of time that it takes within a match to do the task, but also within the season to create something to do that task. That is also a huge determining factor. With us, in a match, we decided that within the time that it would take us to place 12 gears, we would get more points. We would be able to do it in a less amount of time than we would be able to score the same number of fuel to still get 260 points. So effectively, it takes less time to do 12 gears than it takes to do how many balls it would take to get 260 points. Furthermore, what you need to notice is sometimes during years, you may not realize how crucial an element is until you get to a competition. This last year, we saw the rope as, okay, yeah, that's something extra we can do. But then once you got to competition, you realized that if you could not climb the rope, you were significantly hurting your alliance. From there, at kickoff day, what we would do is first we would watch the game animation together, and then from there we would get into small groups. Within these groups, we tried to limit only having one build team member in each group. And we would also allow the business kids to be involved in these conversations. The reason for this is build kids tend to get a little more tunnel vision, and they will want to only think about prototyping right from the start. But business kids will help look at the rules, look through them more thoroughly, and then help us not miss anything. Now this was important because after the little groups would go through the rules, we all came back together, and each group would list a rule that they thought was important that might be overlooked. This last season, that rule was that with the rope, you were allowed to bring your own rope to the field. If you overlook this rule, then you would be stuck working with a thick rope that had no knotting at the end, and that's what you thought you would have to work with. But you could bring your own. So that was important to remember. Also, one other point from the other slide is it said, like, with fuel even mattering, you also have to take your team's history into consideration. Our team, we are historically not very good at making hoppers for our robots. So we decided that it would not be the best decision for us to want to go towards fuel because of the amount of time we would spend in season on the hopper alone would take up most of the 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's important to emphasize that that was an internal team decision based upon what some of the prototyping kids and mentors in past years have experienced. We knew that trying to get a massive hopper worth of balls down to a single or even two double wide set of conveyor belts was just not good, whether we did it in FEC or in the big robots, FRC. On the last side, there's also one more point of emphasis where we decided on day 0 that fuel didn't necessarily matter. We knew it would matter in autonomous because that's where it's most valuable. We knew that climbing was very important because you could spend maybe a week of design time on it and probably get some kind of climber. But I remember saying on the first day, if we're the best gear robot, give me the second best gear robot at an event and I'll dare a shooter to try and win. And that's kind of how we phrased it and how we knew in 2017 that we could go forward with this. That kind of, if you go back to the other point powers, that's the slide. This is a list that you probably can't really read, but that's not the point. The point of this slide is to kind of show you that kind of thinking could have won you or had given you a successful season, any season dating back to 2011. So yeah.
All right, so another thing that our team hit on very heavily was after we discussed some of the game rules and made sure everyone was clarified on them, then we went ahead and we would go through the life cycle of each game piece. This may seem insignificant and like it doesn't matter that much, but this also helps you determine how much time it will actually take to make a device to perform the mission. So in the case of the gear, what is the very start of the life cycle of the gear? Does anyone know?
From the animation, do you remember how the gears got into the field? Yeah, good.
The human player on the side pushes him through the slot.
Okay, what was next? So we got the human players pushes them through the slot onto the field. What was next? Yes?
It was a preload.
Preload. So that was autonomous. Tell me about teleop. So we have a gear on the ground, and this is for a single gear. So we have the one gear on the ground. What happens next?
Go ahead.
The robot has to pick it up.
Okay, robot has to pick it up. What happens after that? Yes, person?
Drive it to the airship.
All right, drive it to the airship. What happens after that?
The robot could score it.
Okay. So that's something that you have to take into consideration.
Does the robot score it?
Not necessarily.
How does it get scored?
It puts it on play.
All right, what happens then?
The human player has to pull it up.
There we go. That's kind of key. Human players were a big deal this year. Okay.
And as Jesse was saying, you have to determine each season what is another factor that's added to that adds to the amount of time that it takes. This year, it was the human player, and the time that it took them to slowly lift up the gear, that's still part of the gear's life cycle. It is not done yet. So you have to take that into consideration. And then how long would each individual action take? How long does it take you to cross the field? How long do you think it'll take you as a team to cross the field with us? Also, another reason why we tried to stay away from fuel was we knew it would take up a lot of the capacity inside of our robot. If we took up the capacity inside of our robot, we would probably have to be a slower moving robot, and that means we would not be able to cross the field as quickly in order to get the materials that we needed. And then, of course, think of any extra variables that might get in your way along your trip, and then just keep in mind the rules that you go over with your team. Rules are very important.
So once we understand what the point powers are, kind of what the rules are surrounding each individual action on the field, we can kind of figure out, we can start writing down all the extra things in the game. Like the one that I like most is basically trying to figure out, it's not on here, figuring out what aspects of the game are manually scored by referees. And not because referees, have a hard job. It's just that there's a lot going on in a match and they may miss something. This was kind of apparent in 2016 where they missed the crossing of the defenses sometimes, or in 2014 where we designed a mechanism that was designed to kick out the ball as a pass, because that's a pass according to the rules, but some referees missed that momentary interaction with the ball. And so we would have redesigned our mechanism had we actually written that kind of thing down. We can also focus on how hard something is. So for example, in 2017, we dealt with how hard the hoppers were. In 2013, we did build a full pyramid to try to figure out how hard it would be to climb it according to the rules that year. You couldn't just reach up to the top rung, you had to climb it one rung at a time. And then in 2016, we fell victim to the mistake of trying to shoot into the high goal with a 16-inch ceiling to get under the low bar, except, oh wait, the low bar is actually 14 inches, or it requires your robot to be shorter than 14 inches because of the angles that your robot takes while going under it. And just writing that down, we would have at least been able to make a conscious decision that could have changed our season that season. In autonomous, autonomous starts the match, and so somebody said you always start with a preload. That's exactly correct. So there hasn't been a single year since 2009 where you haven't started with some kind of preload, or at least a ball that's like right in front of you. But in recent years, the raw point value of autonomous has not been that big of a deal. Even in 2014, where the Cheesy Poops said they designed their robot the way that they did because of autonomous, so they could get all 3 balls by themselves, there were plenty of robots that could shoot the balls by themselves, and always make that one ball. And so you didn't necessarily have to design for the points in autonomous. Yet in 2014, if you missed your ball and the ball bounced its way back down to the other side of the field, that really hurt the start of teleop. And in 2017, if you dropped a gear on the ground, it kind of hurt the first cycle back, because then you have to deal with the gear on the ground while you're placing another gear, and sometimes it slowed your cycle down, and you had to pick that gear up. And in 2016, something that we were trying to set up for World Championships, but we never quite got there, was being able to do the drawbridge or the big door in autonomous, because that was the most time-consuming thing to do in the match, and you're effectively buying yourself time in teleop if you do it in autonomous. And so that's kind of how autonomous can set yourself up for more success in teleop. For some of the lower resource teams, driving forward for 4 seconds, we're going to help them program their robots to drive forward for 4 seconds, because 9 games out of 10, that scores something in autonomous. And then we also had to consider whether we were going to take the risk of doing the side gear this year, or, for example, the risk of doing multiple discs in 2013, the animation that you saw, because there were gears on, there were discs on the ground, versus just doing the one consistent thing that would always get you points. And in 2017, we did take the risk, and it only hurt us once. We never even programmed that middle pick. Harking back to 2016, our decision to go under the low bar, that really hurt our larger strategy. We knew because we locked some kids in a room with an aspiring lawyer. She says it was for 5 hours. I swear it was not that long. They came out and they said exactly how the season actually played out. They knew it on day 0. They said that the high goal is going to be what matters at World Championships. And so we said, okay, we're going to go for the high goal. And yet, we made the decision to also want to do the low bar. And like a lot of teams, we said, well, what if we're not able to do the low bar? That means we have to do all of the other defenses. But what we could have done was our goal was not the defenses. Our end goal was the high goal. Like for our season, we wanted to be successful at the high goal, not necessarily defenses. And being able to explain all of that and make a conscious decision rather than saying, okay, we'll plan to do everything, that would have really helped us that year. In addition, so in 2013, where you saw animation, no, 27, you made, okay, I remember. We're going to see the 2013 animation. You're going to see where the discs enter the field on one side of the field, and we kind of missed that in 2013 for our team. We didn't deal with how we were going to ingest discs from the field until like week 6. It wound up being very effective, but it was just that late in the game where we were prototyping how to get something from the slot. So where to acquire the game piece can actually really hinder your, or help your build season. And then finally, this last point is, do we build a second robot? I think we started building a second robot in 2014, mainly because we had different design directions we were going in for that game. And then this past year, 2017, was the first year we stopped building 2 robots because it was a lot of resources. And by resources, I don't mean necessarily money, I mean time. There's only 6 weeks to build everything. And if you're building 2 robots so you can practice with one while the other's in the bag, you're effectively taking away practice time from the first robot to begin with. It doesn't matter how many kids you have, you're still taking time away from it. And we knew from seasons past that we never quite made it worthwhile to actually have 2 robots.
So this is looking at ILITE's old take on strategy. And during the 2016 season, how we went about it, as Jesse was saying earlier, was we decided that we want to go underneath the low bar, but still be able to shoot in the high goal. For anyone that's not familiar with our design that year, we had a turret design that it would tilt up and it would be able to move side to side. We realized later on that having it have the turret feature moving side to side wasted time and resources and just put more strain on the team, when really only the tilting mechanism was important. Also, as Jesse was saying, we were so tunnel vision and focused on getting this high goal that even though we were still able to do the low goal, we didn't really allow ourselves to see the full advantage, strategic advantage of being able to use that. And because of that, we would continue to try getting the high goal, and we were very inconsistent with it. We would miss a good number of high goal shots because of that inconsistency. And then later on, we noticed that with Alliance captains at Worlds, their number one thing they were looking for was consistency. They did not want a robot that could shoot high goal unless they could consistently shoot that high goal. And this was just a failure of our team in order to make sure that we don't ignore other aspects of it. And the combination we had overall of it.
Going back on the last slide, another thing to point out was that our robot, because of all of its complicated features, we actually were never able to practice with our robot at its peak performance until way later towards the World Championship. So for example, our robot was actually able to score 5 or 6 high goals in our last match, which was very well, but because we didn't have enough practice doing so, we were not able to make it towards Einstein and potentially win.
So in 2017, we started writing some things down. I came up with a worksheet that we'll go over in just a minute, at least an abbreviated version of it. And with this premise as the strategy, we wanted to be the best in the world at one thing, not good at everything. And we wanted to be the best in the world early in the competition season. So at our first event, we wanted to come out and execute this one function, whatever it was, at our first competition and use that to our advantage. We knew that Einstein alliances will usually find there's always if you're in a niche role, you'll usually find a home on an Einstein alliance somewhere. It might not be the winning alliance. Maybe the alliance doesn't make it to Einstein for other reasons, but they could have won the whole thing with just a little bit of luck, or if things had gone a little differently. An example of this are can grabbers in 2015. If all you did was have the best can grabbers in the world in 2015, you would have been there for that niche role in finals when can grabbers actually mattered. We would design every single subsystem in 2017 around it. We knew that basically there are basic things like drivetrain and intaking and all that kind of stuff. We would design them to be the best at whatever the game function was. And so we wound up picking gears, but let's say we didn't. Let's say we picked fuel. That means we would have had the best hopper, and the best hopper is the one that maximizes volume and throughput. Therefore, we would have made the drivetrain as small as possible, or at least take up as little volume as possible. So when Emily earlier said we would go slow across the field, we would have had single-speed drive motors and probably just mini sims because they take up less weight and less volume. And that's just one example of that. To be the best, you need a lot of practice, and as Harrison said, you need practice with your robot at its peak performance, not just practice kind of driving around before bag time. So we knew we wanted to finish the robot early on week 6 weekend, so we could get that practice. And finally, this is kind of controversial in the first community. Rather than focusing on winning matches at our first event, we knew we were going to focus on being the best at one thing, whatever that thing was, because remember, we made this decision last December. If it meant that our primary mechanism got completely destroyed in a match and we needed to sit out a match in the district system, where the qual matches are back to back to back, so we could, if we needed to sit one of them out so we could fix our primary mechanism, we were going to do it. We were not going to go back onto the field and play defense or try and get in people's way or try and do something kind of mediocrely. We wanted to be the best at one thing, and so we were going to sit the match and fix it. It's kind of controversial because you're not trying to do your best to win matches every single time. At another light, at World Championships, some years, some teams say we're going to be the best at defense, and we're going to showcase that defense no matter what the match strategy is. You can't really fault them for that because they're doing the best for their team, and they always need to put their team above an alliance. All right, so 2013, we're going to show another animation. We'll cue that up. We're going to tell you what the point powers are, and then we're going to kind of go through using the worksheet what we might be the best at for that game.
Welcome to the 2013 First Robotics Competition. And this year's game, Ultimate Ascent. Ultimate Ascent is played on a 27 by 54 foot field. Alliances of 3 teams each operate their robots from behind alliance walls at the ends of the field. 4 scoring goals are located in each alliance wall, located at 3 different heights. Each alliance wall also has feeder stations located at the ends of the wall. 2 large pyramids occupy the middle of the field, about a third of the way from the alliance walls. Each pyramid has 3 rungs leading up to the top, which can be climbed by the robots. At the summit of the pyramid is an additional scoring goal. Ultimate Ascent is played with standard flying discs of 3 different colors. The objective is to score as many discs as possible in the goals at the far end of the field. The harder the goal is to hit, the more points it's worth. Robots can track the reflective vision targets around each goal, allowing them to target goals from anywhere on the field. The match begins with each robot in contact with the pyramid at the far end of the field. Robots can be preloaded with up to 3 discs each. A 15-second autonomous period starts the match. During the autonomous period, robots can score discs using pre-programmed instructions. Every end goal scored during the autonomous period scores double points as a bonus. At the end of this period, human drivers step forward to take the controls. As the teleoperated period starts, teams command their robots to score as quickly as possible. Discs can be scored by throwing or placing them into the goals. Robots can hold up to 4 discs at one time. After gathering discs, they can try to score from anywhere on the field. Human players enter discs onto the field by passing them through slots in the feeder stations. Robots in the loading zone are protected from interference by their opponents while they receive discs. But robots not touching this safe zone have to deal with defending opponent robots. Near the end of the match, human players can throw discs onto the field and try to score. At the same time, robots, the more points they will receive. Robots can climb up the sides or the corners of the pyramid, but they have to remain there as the game ends to collect their bonuses. Good luck, and we'll see you at the competitions.
Okay, so from that game animation, what point powers have you guys seen? Or did you guys notice? Yep.
Scoring discs into the goal.
Correct. And what we found through some strategies were that there's actually two methods of getting the disc into the goal. Have you guys noticed which two? Yep.
The low goal and the high goals?
There are low goal and medium goals and high goals, yes. So one thing that we noticed was that there were two methods of scoring Frisbees. One was to stay actually at the loading station and to shoot far range shots very accurately into the high goals, or to make very frequent cycles across the field to score their maximum of four discs at a time. A further strategy that a team could have taken was to actually scale a pyramid, which appears to be the most points that you can score in a match, 30 points. So a team can strategize and spend all their time in the season to scale the entire pyramid and to perhaps score a few low goal discs.
Okay. If you go to the next slide, we have just kind of a field layout for you, but we also placed a couple of the worksheet papers throughout the yep. And so the idea is by the end of kickoff day, we'll have these filled out. And I gave you probably the two most important sheets, which start with how many points we think it'll take to win one of these matches. So in 2013, kind of giving the scoring breakdown, say we know teams can score like 3 discs a cycle. How many cycles do we think they'll do? And the vets, I'm counting on you to speak up because you understand what robots we see in this region. Are robots fast in our region?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Can robots pick up a game piece from the ground that well in our region? No, okay. How many gear robots were there that picked up from the ground this past season? In Chesapeake, there were 2 or 3. Well, there were probably like 6 or 7 overall, but 2 or 3 that were very effective at it. And so given all of that, we try and come up with a way to figure out how many points can we score in this match to guarantee we win almost every single one. One of the takeaways on this worksheet is, don't just say 200 points. We get 200 points in this game and we win every single match, because of course, if you got 200 points every single match, you win it. But what's more practical? So what do you think the average scores were locally? People who have been through a season. Dennis, what do you think?
How many points do you think roughly would be given in a match as an estimation?
A good match?
Yeah.
I would expect a good match to be 300 plus points.
So 100 discs scored in a match?
How many discs?
Yeah. We'll start with that. How many discs do you think would be scored?
I'm sorry, discs or gears?
Discs.
Discs. There we go.
Oh. I would say that if you were to hit 5 discs with transiting to pick them up and put them down and then toss them, I would say 5 discs.
5 discs a team?
Yeah.
Okay. It turns out that's about right for Chesapeake. It's about 5 discs a team. And then around here, how many teams do you think actually scored above the first rung on the pyramid? You think 1, you think 0? So basically out of 100-something teams, nobody, almost nobody. There might be 1, but almost nobody. So an average score in the match we're thinking is going to be 45 points plus the low bar plus some in autonomous. So we're thinking maybe like 60 points, given what's a test beat. In prior years, we can triple that when we get to Worlds. If there's no like weird bonuses like in 2017, you can just triple the chess peak score, and that's what it'll take at Worlds. The next part of the worksheet, if you take a look, describes what it like our prior year's point powers, and kind of as you act out as a group, you're going to write down what you think this year's point powers are. And then question 6 says, we'll develop a commanding lead in the first 30 seconds by doing what? Effectively, that means we're going to do something in teleop, or autonomous, but then what? How do we set up for teleop, and how do we keep the other alliance guessing? So how do we do that in 2017?
Well, first off, we would try and get a gear onto the airship, so then hopefully we could get out the first 2 rotors, well, the first rotor spinning with the gear that we placed there. And if we have reliable alliance partners, maybe we'll get the second, but that wasn't an occurring event.
And at Rumble in the Roads, where did we end autonomous?
We ended actually autonomous halfway across the field, closer to our feeder station.
Yeah, and in finals, what did I tell you to do after autonomous?
We tried to hit our opposing robots that failed to score their gear.
Yeah, we were going to try and steal their gear. So that's how, in 2017, we would get a commanding lead. We basically put them, if they didn't score everything on autonomous, we'd take one of their gears and put them down 1 gear already in their cycles. The next important, just in the interest of time, really the next important question on there that's kind of snuck in is number 8 about what game function should we be the best at, based upon everything we've written down, based upon, usually we're at 4 hours into kickoff at this point from all the pizza and acting out and tossing wiffle balls that we've done. And so we made the determination that there are 2 point powers we could go for, and we would have to figure out which one to write down there. Yeah. And then for people who are on remote, who get this presentation later, that is a link to the actual worksheet from 2017.
Okay, so bouncing off back on the idea that we want to be the best in the world at one thing, we chose doing the gears. And the main question for that was, how are we going to maintain being the best at that? So the first question was, after the first district competition, we saw that our gear mechanism was great in picking up gears off the floor, but how are we going to maintain that after people have seen our design, and how are we going to improve that so we can lesser the time between the cycles so we can more effectively score the gears. So the first thing we did was we had a little bit of trouble picking up the gears off the ground, going at a faster rate at the gear. So we needed to pick up it, we needed something to have it closer to the active intake, which was we implemented the roller on top of it. And then for also things that hindered us in the match were having the airship, like Emily said before, in the middle of the field. So we needed something like automations to help us, which was the camera and other things like that, like LEDs to communicate with our team. And we need to be the fastest at this so we can do it more times, which effectively has a greater score.
Also, to add on to what Calvin was saying, you want to try to do your best as a team. If you want to continue to be the best, you can't ignore any small problems that arise during the season, or what may seem as small problems and then could ultimately lead to you losing matches. So for us, the problem that we addressed immediately as soon as we saw it was for our active intake. Whenever it would drop down, it would continuously hit the frame of our robot, and it slowly started to bend itself downward more and more. And although this didn't make enough of a difference initially for us picking up gears, we realized that sooner or later it would, especially if we ever got in a match where someone hit us really hard. So we immediately fixed this by adding little blocks on either side of it and adding cushioning to it in order to prevent our robot's active intake from going too far down.
Just one prime example of trying to stay the best. This is a robot. This is a Team 148's robot in the off season, They actually completed this robot all the way in November, and they were actually able to score 11 gears in a single match by themselves. And this is essentially a prime example of constantly trying to be the best and trying to improve your robot in order to be most successful on the field.
Yeah. I'll say that in season, I think the best robot was 610. We actually played against them in a match at World Championships. All they did was run down the field and back 6 times in a match. So if you add that on top of their gear and autonomous, that was 7 gears a match. They can average that. I think at World Championships in IRI, we averaged 5.5 and 6 gears respectively. So if you look at what made their robot fast, it was driving, so practice, and it was automation. So the very last slide, I promise, these are kind of what drive me in my day-to-day at work, kind of this top quote. You can apply the strategy of trying to be the best at one thing to kind of anything you do, whether it's kind of a high school job at the cashier somewhere, or a customer service representative, or a programmer doing bank software. If you want to be the best, you basically have to understand what to do first, and then be the best at that thing. I got the concept of point powers from Den Black. He did a VCU presentation, a presentation at VCU at the workshops there in 2011. He got a lot of his ideas from Team Hammond, Team 71 from Indiana. Most of you don't know, I don't think anybody knows, Team 71 basically won, I think, 3 world championships in 4 to 5 years, or something crazy. And this was back before you had all of these COTS mechanisms and gearboxes and all of these this wonderful array of motors that never burn out. So they're definitely a good team to kind of learn from and figure out what works for our team. And finally, Karthik, he gave a talk every year at World Championships until 2016 when he retired. Very energetic guy. He always talks about pragmatism and focus, and kind of what it takes to win a single match, and then what it takes to win an event, and kind of priorities of where the individual mechanisms fall in priorities on your robot. And kind of like that applies not only to the robot, but also it's kind of how we apply a strategy to the business team as well. So, and that wraps up the presentation. Are there any questions? No? I promise we won't put students away in a box where they can't see the animation this year. We're actually going to get a little bit more involved in acting out with the game pieces to kind of understand how they interact with the field elements this year for kickoff. For 2018 will be, we come up with it together, we all understand what it will be, and once we write it down, it's effectively like a law. It takes a lot to get that changed. One person can't change it by themselves, not even me.
And also to add on one final factor, was this part of the reason why we don't have build kids together in a sub-team whenever we're going through the rules initially. No matter what sub-team you belong to, no matter how much you know about this possible idea, if you have an idea on strategy that you think, even if you're not sure it'll work, speak up and mention it, because that could make the difference between a winning strategy and a losing strategy.